Okay, question 8 from your FRQ packet came from 2018 exam number 4. So you can read the problem and see what happens. Based on the design of the study with statistically significant results, remember statistically significant equals reject HO. Allow the medical center to conclude that the new procedure causes a reduction in recovery time compared to standard procedure for patients similar to those in the study. I said yes, because the treatments, standard or new procedure, were randomly assigned, eliminating potential confounding variables. They said, yes, it would be reasonable to conclude the new procedure causes a reduction in recovery time for patients similar to those in the study. Woo. The patients in the study were randomly assigned to the 2 procedures, which reduces the chance that confounding variables will affect the results. They even use the word confounding variables. Therefore, the statistically significant reduction in mean recovery time can be attributed to the new procedure being superior to the standard procedure. That is a lot more words than me. Let's see what the scoring says. So section 1 is part A, so we get 1 score up here. Correctly states that it is reasonable to make a causal conclusion. I read causal causation, and that seemed real silly. Justifies the causal conclusion based on random assignment of patients to procedures or procedures to patients, or by saying that a randomized experiment was conducted. So because the treatments, standard or new procedure, were randomly assigned. Includes the context of the situation. I have this context, so let's read the notes and see if that counts. Partially correct if the response satisfies component 1, so you had to say yes, and provides weak justification of the causal conclusion by stating that there was a random assignment or that randomized experiment was conducted but with no context, or by stating an experiment was conducted or there was an assignment without the word randomized. And you had to have context for that. Or if you stated the study reduces the chance of confounding variables, but you never referred to the random assignment being the most important part. Note if the response says that it's not reasonable because the results could have been due to random chance, and explains there is evidence for a causal conclusion based on random assignment. Okay, so if you explain that there was evidence, but that it's possible that was due to chance, I don't know, don't do that. If you talked about other aspects of random assignment, then those are considered extraneous, and the response can be scored as an E unless those aspects are incorrect. So if you elaborated and you elaborated incorrectly, it would knock you down 1 peg. If the response states it is correct to make a causal conclusion, but includes incorrect or contradictory justification, such as random selection of patients, the response is scored as an I. Okay, so a few things here. I think that that should count as my context. I'm going to cautiously count it, but maybe if this is a 4-part question, is it a 4-part? I don't know why they don't just do 4 parts. They prefer to do 3 parts because then they don't have to decide whether to round up or down. Just let it be a decimal. But they didn't ask me. If it had been a 4-part, I probably would have chosen to round down if I had to choose at the end. I'm going to go ahead and do it, but make a note to myself include more context. And then next time I'll try to keep that in mind and make sure that I have really good context. I was getting a little lazy, but we're not going to be lazy on the AP exam. Okay, I already checked because I didn't want to be embarrassed that my t-score and p-value was wrong, so I already checked. I know that they're right. Section 2, essentially correct if you have the following 4 components. Parameters are defined correctly. So mu1 is the population mean recovery time for all patients receiving the standard treatment, and mu-n is the population mean recovery time for all patients receiving the new procedure. Hypotheses imply equality of the null and correct direction of the alternative. So if you did S first, it should be mu-s is greater than mu-n. If you did n first, it should be mu-n is less than mu-s. Correct test is identified by name or formula. This is a 2-sample t-test with means. Correct test statistic for a difference in means is calculated. Like I said, I already double-checked that this was right. Partially correct if you have 2 or 3 of those 4 components. So that's 1 essentially correct. That goes for this, 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 and that, which is a little silly. If the response identifies a z-test for equal means, component 3 is not satisfied, but component 4 could be satisfied. I hope you didn't take the confidence interval approach, but if you did, read that on your own. Section 3, essentially correct if you make the following 3 components. You make reference to a correct p-value that is consistent with your test statistic. So this should be 8.358 times 10 to the negative 12th power. Or you could have put approximately 0. I would write out the thing, but it is approximately 0 technically. Correctly justifies the conclusion based on a p-value or the statistic. Correctly states the conclusion in context. So here's my decision, and this is all in context. Since the p-value is less than A, we reject HO. There is sufficient evidence to say the new procedure will have less recovery time from the surgery on average than those who receive the standard treatment. That didn't check the assumptions. What? Okay. This is a really weird scoring guideline. I don't care for this either. Note, if the 3 sections are scored as an E to earn a score as a 4 of a complete response, both conditions in step 2 must be correctly. Did I skip that? Okay, so they wrote it out as 4 steps, and they talked about the assumptions. The assumptions you have to check are that treatments were randomly assigned, not sample was randomly selected, treatments were randomly assigned. And then the sampling distribution is normal because both sample sizes are sufficiently large. But in these calculations, they never had you check it until here, which is very annoying. If the 3 sections of the response are scored as an E to earn a 4 as a complete response, both conditions in step 2 must be correctly stated and justified. So yes, both of these were correctly stated and justified. Additional conditions inappropriate for a 2-sample test must not be stated. Otherwise, the score earns a 3, a substantial response. Stupid. all 3 sections correct with conditions for inference in order to get a 4. So it's kind of like there's 4 sections, but they said that there were only 3. Three sections essentially correct without conditions for inference is a 3. 2 sections essential and 1 section partial is also a 3. So if you got 1 partially correct and 2 essentially correct, it didn't actually matter if you did assumptions or not. God, that's so stupid. It didn't matter. They gave you a partially correct. They gave you 3 out of 4. Okay. 2 out of 4, 2 sections essential, and then the 4th was an I. 1 E and then 1 or 2 P's. 3 P's is a 2. The 1 E is 1 E and 2 I's is 1 out of 4. Or PPI is a 1 out of 4. So they did that because they wanted to put the least emphasis on the assumptions. So in order to get 4 out of 4, you had to have the assumptions correct. But if you already had a partially correct, they still gave you 3 out of 4 if you only had 1 partially correct, even if you didn't have the assumptions. It's silly. They did not ask me. I do not care for that. But it is what it is.